Here's Thomas E. Woods, Jr. You remember him. He's the author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History, among other fine books, including How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. And he's written a piece today saying Ron Paul got in trouble, I guess, because Ron Paul violated the rules. Hi, Tom. How are you?
How you doing, Ron? Great, thanks.
Pretty good. Yeah. How did he violate the rules?
Well, when I say the rules, I'm talking about the unstated rules of American politics. And one of those rules is a politician is never allowed to level with the American people.
That's a gaffe, isn't it? Isn't that the definition of a gaffe?
Yeah, I think so. That's right. A gaffe is when you accidentally speak the truth, and then you spend the next 2 weeks backpedaling and apologizing and so on and on. But the funny thing with Ron Paul is that the establishment has now run into somebody who doesn't particularly feel like backing down, is not inclined to back down, never backs down, regardless of who the bully is.
He politely forges ahead.
That's
when
right.
When Giuliani demanded he retract his statement, instead he further elaborated on it in a very calm way.
Exactly, and because Ron Paul is, frankly, a gentleman, as anyone can see, he's an extremely decent man. You know, he's a medical doctor and all this. I'll be a jerk for him and simply say that you would, frankly, have to be some kind of a retard with an IQ below 50 to think that he was saying that the U.S. brought 9/11 on itself, or it was the U.S.'s fault, or he's blaming America. I mean, you would have to be a moron to think that's what he's saying. And Giuliani knows perfectly well he's not a moron. He knows
when Giuliani said that, I've never heard such a thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, what kind of
come
idiot
on.
would you have to be? There are whole books written on this all over the place, and this guy's going to run the country? No, I mean, Giuliani just knows how to get a good red meat line out there for his audience.
And he's
not that stupid.
You point out that the CIA's Michael Schur, who headed the bin Laden desk in his time and is by no means anti-war, told CNN, quote, "We're being attacked for what we do in the Islamic world, not for who we are or what we believe in or how we live," end quote. And for anybody to not be able to grasp that is incredible. In other words, they think it's some abstract thing, that a bunch of ragheads look at us and say, we've got to attack them. They treat their women well. I mean, what?
Right, I know. People are frankly living in a dream world, and so you got Ron Paul coming along, who actually points out that sometimes when you bomb people or you starve them to death, as Bill Clinton did during the 1990s, and his Secretary of State said, "Yeah, it's worth it that 500,000 children died." She said that on TV.
It was a price we're willing to pay.
Now, she didn't say, "Oh, I disagree with that figure. No, that's Saddam's fault." She said, "Yes, that's right. The sanctions did this, but it was worth doing." When you do something like that, can you believe people get angry? And that's the commonsensical principle Ron Paul is saying. I mean, imagine if 500,000 Americans were starved. But
now you had the chairman of the Republican Party in Michigan calling for sponsors of debates to disinvite Ron Paul, not allow him to speak because I guess it pissed this guy off.
Right. Well, I got some great, interesting scoop here for you, Ron. If people go to the LouRockwell.com blog, I've just got a brand new item up there. Apparently, things are in complete chaos at the headquarters of the Michigan Republican Party.
Chaos and shock at Michigan GOP HQ.
You got it. You're looking right at it.
Because the office can't handle the volume and doesn't know what to do about reaction to Saul and Newsy's censorious statements. That's great. You say they're totally freaked out. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch.
Right, exactly. His voicemail is full. They've taken their telephone number off the website, so Ron Paul supporters are finding other ways to call them, other ways to get through. So they're probably going to try to get their phone lines up again tomorrow, and so Ron Paul supporters are going to keep bombarding them. And as you say, it couldn't happen to a more deserving bunch, because in effect what they're saying is, you can be terrible on every issue. You can be a big spender, like the phony John McCain, who is frankly a huge spender for all his protests of the contrary notwithstanding. You can ignore the party platform on abortion. You can be for open borders, but if you say that American foreign policy might make foreigners angry, well, then you should be purged. There's something, I mean, George Orwell, call your office. This is absolutely bizarre.
You also pointed out in an item on your blog that Wolfowitz agreed with Ron Paul in saying another reason, this was back in 2003, May 29, Wolfowitz said another reason for the invasion has been almost unnoticed but huge, namely that the ousting of Saddam would allow the United States to remove its troops from Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, is what they did.
Yeah, that's right.
Where their presence has long been a major al-Qaeda grievance. There you have it.
Yeah, that was interesting.
From Reuters, May 29, 2003.
So there's Wolfowitz himself saying that, look, it was an al-Qaeda grievance that we had troops in Saudi Arabia. Now, is Wolfowitz saying, well, I guess we invited 9/11, we were asking for it? Anybody, again, who has an IQ above 50 knows he wasn't saying that.
There are some people, by the way, very upset with you being so aggressive in saying that, although I think you're responding in kind. In other words, when you demonize those who speak against Ron Paul, and people say, well, how can you do that,
No, but I think in this case you have to, because
it's
frankly, they
matter.
have to know that Ron Paul is not saying the U.S. is to blame for 9/11. It is an establishment trick.
He's saying actions have consequences.
Actions have consequences.
Yes. And these are some, and you can argue, in fact, I had a caller earlier who made the basic argument that regardless, we can't change the essential nature of our actions with the world the way it is, which is a legitimate argument, because at least it recognizes that, okay, we have to act as the Imperium, we have to act in preemptive ways, well, then we have to expect blowback.
Right, yeah, I mean, he's not even necessarily in this limited point, he's not even necessarily saying, although his own opinion is we should try to keep out of these other countries' affairs. His limited point is, if you want to do that, you have to understand that there will be consequences, and you have to be aware of those consequences. But
exactly. So you can't live in some la-la land.
Exactly.
Believing these things that are asserted, that we were attacked for our freedom. And,
right.
It's an amazing. People don't attack others for abstractions.
Right, and Ron, let me tell you something. I'm actually a very easygoing, pleasant person. I'm even kind of funny sometimes. But in a case like this, where obviously what they're trying to do is oust, a real conservative from the debate,
a strict constitutionalist,
who's much better. I mean, look at all those other so-called, Republicans. They're asked, what would you cut from the federal budget, and they're all hemming and hawing. Tommy Thompson is basically saying, well, maybe I'd cut something from paragraph 17B, line 32. Whereas Ron Paul is saying, well, look, I'd start cutting the departments. Well, shouldn't they all be saying that?
He is pointing a dagger at the heart of the system, and so they will silence him one way or another, I do believe, but we'll have fun in the interim. Thanks very much, Thomas E. Woods, Jr. We appreciate it, and we look forward to your next book.
Thanks a lot, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.